to Crimson Tide Rewind, presented by Bud Light. It's for the fans. Golden Flake, the official potato chip of the Alabama Crimson Tide. And by Baumhauer's Victory Grill, legendary fun, legendary food, and the official watch party location of the Crimson Tide. Now live, this is Crimson Tide Rewind. Here's Roger Hoover.
Roll Tide and welcome to Crimson Tide Rewind, presented by Bud Light. Hello again, everybody. This is Roger Hoover filling in for Eli Gold, and I'm joined by former Crimson Tide linebacker Corey Reamer as we're visiting on Monday, October 31st. That means it's Nick Saban's birthday. Roll Tide, Coach, but also happy Halloween to everybody out there, and it's great to be with you once again here in Vestavia Hills.
Hey, happy Halloween, Roger. Yeah, excited to be here. We're finally getting the back half of this season going. It's hopefully this off week was really good for a lot of our guys. I know it couldn't have come at a better time than right now, with a lot of guys banged up, a lot of injuries going on. So excited to be here, ready for this week. We got kind of a big matchup going on Saturday.
Yeah, rivalry game. It's back again. I mean, top 15 matchup.
Yeah, and a game that at the beginning of the year probably didn't have circled for a lot of people. I know a lot of people were talking about Texas A&M being that marquee game for the SEC West, and here we go. LSU's back at it, first year under head coach Brian Kelly, and they're off and running. And I'm talking about clicking at the very right time. It is a team that has progressed a lot since the beginning of the season, and that's kind of what you expect from a team that's got a new coach, new system, replacing a lot of players. They went out there, were very active in the transfer portal, picked up a lot of guys, lost a few guys, but he's managed to put together a pretty solid squad, and they're playing extremely well in this part of the season, and not many people expected it to be that quick of a turnaround for sure.
So tonight we're going to be talking about what's coming up for Alabama football on Saturday against the LSU Tigers. We'll be recapping the season at this point as well. We certainly want to invite your phone calls this evening. If you'd like to join us on the show, give us a call on the Yellowhammer Brewing Hotline, 877-202-BAMA. Stay tuned for more. It's Crimson Tide Rewind live from Baumhauer's Victory Grill in Vestavia Hills. This is the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield.
Young with time now steps up to the pocket, looks, throws deep, got a man down there. Brooks has it at the 30. He'll be slung down at the 31-yard line, but it's another first down for the Crimson Tide.
Tide fans, you can keep up with everything Alabama with the Alabama Crimson Tide mobile app, presented by Cadence Bank. Available at the App Store and Google Play. Download the Alabama Crimson Tide mobile app now for free. Again, it's Crimson Tide Rewind. We will be taking your calls 877-202-BAMA if you want to talk some Crimson Tide football on this Halloween night. And for the Crimson Tide, a 7-1 season so far. Obviously the loss against Tennessee, but mixed in with some really good performances. Just in your own words, what has the journey of this team been like so far through 8 games?
Yeah, I think it's an unexpected one. I think the fact that we are 7-1 is, that is definitely expected. The one loss, unfortunately, to Tennessee. Tennessee's playing extremely well. You saw them play this weekend against Kentucky, and they really just put it on. And the offense continues to be a juggernaut in this league. They're not having a problem scoring against anybody. I mean, we saw them against LSU, some good teams in this conference, and they're continuing to put up points. I think their offense is tops in the country. But, besides that one, even with a chance to win that ball game and be 8-0 at this point, I think from my standpoint and what we've talked a lot about this year is it's not the consistent team that we're used to seeing from Alabama, but they have found a way to win. They've found a way to win ball games when it's come down to the very end, whether that's against Texas A&M, with a chance to win against Tennessee. Arkansas pulls it pretty close in the third quarter. They find a way to stretch that lead. It's just where there's a lot of things that I think are frustrating from a fan standpoint, just because we're so used to being able to do certain things, not committing penalties, running the ball effectively to where we're setting up the offense for advantage, good down and distance situations that we want to be in. And, we haven't really had that game in and game out like we're used to so far. And I think this off week, I think, was probably a really good time for us to go back to the drawing board and kind of figure out what do we got to figure out, what do we have to work on to where we want to be the team that we need to be to beat some really good opponents coming up for the rest of the season. If we want to have a chance to be in Atlanta, we've got 2 tough road games ahead of us, and then Auburn at the end, which we always know no matter what, it's going to be a tough game. So there's still a lot of positives to take away from this season so far. The defense has played extremely well, and we're seeing some changes from personnel this last game at least. And then Bryce Young continues to be Bryce Young. He has not had a single drop off. It just seems like he's doing it a lot himself, and I think he would, and we as a coaching staff, as fan base, as a team, would love to see some more support around him from receivers, offensive line, running backs, all of it, just to try to help free him up to where he's not having to win ball games running around and making miraculous plays, because you can't rely on that game in and game out. Even though he's shown the ability to do it, it's still hard to win ball games like that consistently. You don't want to have that as your only weapon from an offensive standpoint to go out there and win some ball games.
And how big is this week for him? I mean, he's been able to be resting a little bit, making sure the shoulder is good to go. We talked with him earlier today for an interview for Crimson Drive coming up later this week, and he feels really good in the bye week. Seems like it was really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you hope so. You hope he's able to get some rest, and that's all that you can do. You can't create time. So this, like we talked about earlier, this bye week couldn't have come at a better situation for him to relax that shoulder, get as much treatment. I mean, I'm sure he probably stayed in Tuscaloosa the entire time, didn't go home, and was just rehabbing around the clock, just trying to find a way to where that shoulder doesn't give him any problems, where he's able to make every throw and not having to worry about any feedback from his shoulder saying it hurts, and just get comfortable. I think the last game, what was it, Tennessee, he came out and he looked like he was on fire.
Yeah,
couldn't
normal
miss.
Bryce Young.
Couldn't miss, couldn't make any mistakes. And then we saw Mississippi State, there were some missed opportunities, some easy throws that were thrown over receivers' heads, just a few things that we're not used to seeing Bryce Young make. And I don't know if that has to do with just a lack of preparation because he had to sit on the sideline, did not practice as much, or if it is that shoulder that might still be lingering. But you can tell he's out there and competing, and he's ready to go. He's well enough to go out there and play games, but hopefully this bye week and him getting some extra rest is going to be huge for us because we've got some really tough tests coming.
Really do. It's LSU coming up this week, a 6 o'clock start. And then also earlier today we learned that the next road game after that, November 12th, against the Ole Miss Rebels is scheduled for 2:30. It'll be on CBS, and Ole Miss is open this week, and they're like Alabama, just one loss so far this year.
Yeah, I mean they got a great season. Lane Kiffin's doing a good job over there. They're an explosive offense that can put points on the board. Probably not as much as they were last year with Matt Corral at the helm, but they're still a good offense. Lane knows how to draw plays up, and I can guarantee you when we go over there to play those guys, he'll have a lot. He knows exactly where the weak points are from an Alabama defense standpoint. He saw it so often. He saw it for a couple years in practice. He knows where he can expose or try to take advantage of different matchups. And I guarantee you, we talked last week that Mike Leach probably wasn't watching a ton of Tennessee tape and trying to take things away from that game to implement. The complete opposite is going to be true for Lane Kiffin. He is going to study that film, ad nauseum. He's going to try to find ways to go out there and try to put points up on the board. And the one thing about Ole Miss, though, is their defense is playing a lot better than they have been in the past couple of years. I wouldn't say they're a great defense, but they are able to keep them in ball games, and we've seen that throughout this season. Now they're sitting at 8-1. What are they, 7th or they're top 10, I think, at this point overall. Huge season so far from Ole Miss, especially from what they lost last year.
So it's going to be interesting. Alabama at LSU, then at Ole Miss. 2 tough games coming up for the Crimson Tide after the open date we just saw on Saturday. Again, we'll be taking your calls at 877-202-BAMA. Want to invite you as well to stop by Innisfree downtown this Wednesday night for a Bud Light special from 9 to 11 p.m. and your chance to win a pair of tickets to the Iron Bowl. That's courtesy of Bud Light and the Crimson Tide Sports Network. We'll continue with more in just a moment. This is the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield.
Young operating again from the pistol. Will hand it off left side to Gibbs. He'll run right side. 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Alabama. Jahmyr Gibbs. 19 yards, and the Crimson Tide has a 13-0 lead.
Chris Stewart filling in for Eli Gold on that call. And our first call tonight will be presented by Alabama 811. Alabama 811, reminding you to call 811 before you dig. Again, if you'd like to join us on the show, the phone call, you can give us a call on the Yellowhammer Brewing Hotline at 877-202-BAMA. We just heard a highlight from Jahmyr Gibbs, and he really can do it all for the Crimson Tide. Still the leading receiver, still the leading rusher. We knew he'd be the leading rusher, or had a good idea, but he's also been so dynamic in the passing game.
Yeah, yes, and it was really more early on in the year. I think it's kind of balancing out where some of these other receivers, we're spreading the ball around a pretty good bit now. We're not having as many drop balls, which also helps from the receiving category standpoint. But he's a guy that's so dynamic, and we were all excited. There were a lot of people who were touting him to be a Heisman contender coming into this season because everybody saw the athletic ability, what he can do in the running game and the passing game and the kick return game if we needed him to. He's just an all-around athlete. And what we've been able to utilize him with is not just running between the tackles. Bill O'Brien's done a great job of finding creative ways to get him the ball where it's not necessarily just line up in the eye and run between the tackles, getting him speed sweeps or outside the tackles, just get him in space because he's a guy that can make anybody miss. I mean, he's just unbelievable. He's unbelievably quick and shifty, and even when it looks like guys might have him hemmed up, he can just pop out of there and break for big runs. But he's been a welcome addition to this the running back room this year, and a very different dynamic from what we've got in a few of these other guys that play running back for us as well. But it's been fun to watch him. He's a guy that has had more explosive plays in this season so far. And, and that's what's leveled out. When you look at the stats on the box scores of we rushed for this, we did this or whatever, and most of it is really because of the big plays that he creates. And you've got to have that in these games. You got to have the ability for somebody. We don't have that receiver right now that really takes the top off of defenses. And so we're finding different ways to create explosive plays. And Jahmyr Gibbs is the guy that usually we lean on to do it.
Yeah, certainly. And the Arkansas runs were incredible to see. 2 over 75-yard runs. He had to put that game away. And then people look as well to seeing, okay, can the running game just completely end a ball game or get Alabama that long drive that'll take a team out of it? What needs to happen for more consistency in the run game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I think everybody wants the answer to it. I wish I did. Was a miracle worker can tell you exactly what it's going to be. The offensive line continues to improve. There's been some games where the run blocking hasn't been what we need it to be. We've been great in terms of pass blocking a lot of times. I think it's just we're not putting the pieces of the puzzle together for one game altogether. One game we're great in the run game, one game we're great in pass blocking, and then we just need that full, complete game that we expect to see, and I think Coach Saban expects to see, and these players want as well. We're just not putting it all together all at once, and that shows when you look at some of the games that we've had and how close they've been, and teams that we should really be dominating and having a lot of success against. It's coming down to the final few drives, final few minutes of the game. So I think it's going to be getting some push off the line of scrimmage has been one of the things that I don't think that we've seen so far this year from this offensive line group, and really pushing some guys back. And we faced some really good defensive line units this year. So not to take away from our offensive line, but what we've seen from Alabama in the past is, we have expectations, and that's part of being at the top is people really want to see that year in, year out, no matter what you lose, next guy up. You hear all these sayings, and it takes some time. We've got some new faces, and just like LSU's got new faces, we got them too, and hopefully they're continuing to gel throughout this season. They start clicking here towards the back half.
So we're looking to see as Alabama gets ready for LSU coming up this Saturday, Ole Miss after that, then Austin Peay, then Auburn, and all of a sudden that's the end of November and the regular season, but we're certainly hopeful that Alabama can get back to Atlanta and play for an SEC championship. Again, if you want to give us a call tonight, the Yellowhammer Brewing Hotline is open at 877-202-BAMA. This is the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield.
Throw and catch made. Touchdown, Alabama. Trayshawn Holden. 6 yards, 8:19 to go in the half, and Bama now leading it 20-0.
If you'd like to be part of tonight's Crimson Tide Rewind show, submit your question to Corey Reamer on the Alabama Media Group Twitter line at UA_CTSN. That's brought to you by AL.com, your source for SEC sports. Of course, we're streaming live as well on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And Ethan Caravan, our outstanding video producer, is looking at the comments. So if we see any good questions in there, we'll be taking those as well. As going back to that Yellowhammer Brewing Company hotline, the number is 877-202-BAMA, and that's where Mike from Birmingham joins us now. Roll Tide. Happy Halloween, Mike.
Happy Halloween, guys. Yeah. Woo. Clear my throat here. You know, I was like a whoop there. Well, let's see. Well, we know it's November sweepstakes right here, and we know we dealt with a loss to Tennessee, so we got tricked up in Knoxville. But I tell you, remember this season, we will not be tricked. We're going to be treating ourselves to another Western Division title, and we knock off LSU, knock off Ole Miss, knock off Austin Peay, and then the other team down Lee County coming to T-Town. We're going to throw down on them. We're going to bust them down on top of them Auburn Tigers. What's left of their season, we're going to finish them off and then get back to Atlanta and take on whichever team come out of the Eastern Division. And we're going to win the SEC title, and we're going to the playoffs again, play for another national title.
That's the plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy enough. I mean, just count it. Go ahead and chalk it up. We don't even have to show up for the rest of them. It's awesome. I love Mike's optimism. I mean, we got I like the game plan. We got some tough tests ahead of us, and probably two of the tougher tests that we've had so far this season outside of a couple games. But, this conference has just been – this is why they play the games, because we talked about it a little while ago. Going into this season, if you would have pegged who the teams are that you've got to really watch out for out of both divisions, who's going to be the contenders in the playoff race, and it's really turned out to be a very different story than what we probably initially thought. But we've got some tough tests ahead of us, but there's some good teams out there. There's still a really good battle this weekend with Georgia, Tennessee, number 1 versus number 2. That's going to be a huge matchup. I don't know when the last time that game had this kind of implications going into the season. And, I expect it to be a close game. It's going to be interesting to see how Georgia and Kirby Smart watched our film, because they run similar style defenses. Yeah. So I mean, it's like you saw what the blueprint is against this style of defense, and it's going to be a fun game to watch. And who comes out of that Eastern Division? You probably thought Florida was going to be a team that, especially early on after that big win against Utah that they had, they were playing really well. Everybody put them up in the top 10 pretty quickly, and then all of a sudden they've had some bumps in the road that they haven't been able to get over. Anthony Richardson's been playing extremely well, and they just haven't been able to finish off a few games. They had some changes, and they actually had a chance to beat Tennessee. I mean, people forget that. That wasn't that long ago. They had a final drive with an opportunity to win that ball game against Tennessee, and they still got a lot of talent. So we saw Georgia really kind of have their way with Florida this past weekend. But looking at our schedule, remaining schedule, both of these games coming up could have some huge implications. And really, if certain things play out, we've got to win these ball games. I mean, that's part of what Coach Saban talked about after that Tennessee loss is we still control our own destiny. And that's the main thing is we've got to go out there and win both of these ball games so that we can have a chance to be back in Atlanta, because we're playing two teams that in the SEC West, if they beat us or we drop one of these ball games, there's a good chance that we don't end up back in Atlanta. And so there's nothing bigger and there's nothing better than November football that matters like these next two games that we've got.
Yeah, it's really interesting looking at the SEC East race as well. You have Tennessee and Georgia. Some people are even saying that, say Georgia beats Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Tennessee finishes 11-1, but has that win over Alabama. They may be one of the most attractive, one-loss teams, and they don't have to play Alabama again.
That's right.
So they could find a way to sneak into the playoff once again. I mean, that's fascinating to think about. Even Georgia, they wouldn't have the win necessarily against Alabama, but maybe even avoiding the Crimson Tide again, or whoever comes out of the SEC West, if Ole Miss is able to come out on top, it could be fascinating for the playoff conversation.
Yeah, you look at their resume so far and what they've done, how convincingly they've won ball games, and there's a very good chance that whoever loses this, if it's a close game, both of these teams are not going to fall very far. Whoever loses is not going to fall very far out of the current seeding of 1 and 2. And they're going to have a really good argument to put if we can have a chance to go to Atlanta and win that ball game, and both of those teams, one of those teams has one loss, there's 3 SEC teams that have a very good argument to be in that playoff picture. Probably won't happen. I think there's plenty of, with some of the strengths of the other conferences. And you look at Oregon. Oregon is a team that got demolished by Georgia in that opening game. But what they've done since then, they've really put themselves back in the hunt with a chance to win the Pac-12. And you got a one-loss Pac-12 team. Who are you going to put in? It's going to be tough to be on that committee this year if that scenario does play out. It's still a lot of football left to play. But there's some really good teams that are out there. TCU, I think, is a team that
hanging around, 8-0.
8-0.
And then Michigan State and Ohio State are going to play each other. That's kind of similar to Tennessee, Georgia. That's for a division championship.
Yeah, and Clemson. Clemson's undefeated as well. I mean, they've still got they're undefeated now. If you just watch Clemson, are you as impressed with what Clemson has done so far this year as what they have been in the past? I think you could probably say the same. Alabama and Clemson seem to be in that same boat. Alabama and Clemson are both relying on what they've done in the past, but what they've done to this point, there's been some blemishes. It's going to be really difficult to figure out who those Final Four teams are if things go the way that we win the next couple of games and find our way back to Atlanta and everything else plays out. It's going to be really difficult conversations around that table for the playoff committee to figure out who's going to be those Final Four teams.
Alabama's got to keep winning to stay in the conversation. We'll keep talking about that when we return as you listen to Crimson Tide Rewind as we come to you live tonight from Baumhower's Victory Grill in Vestavia Hills. This is the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield.
Down to 3 on the clock. 2 on the play clock. 1, they get the snap off. They throw, and it is batted away. And incomplete. And Bama takes over on downs.
We'd like to be part of tonight's Crimson Tide Rewind show. Submit your question to Corey Reamer on the Alabama Media Group Twitter line at UA_CTSN. That's brought to you by AL.com, your source for SEC sports. So we've talked a lot about the Crimson Tide offense so far, what we've seen through 8 games. How about the defense and the journey it's been on, even with some limited depth on the defensive line last game against State?
Yeah, hopefully we're going to be able to get some of these guys back. Deontay Lawson, Jaheim Oates, and DJ Dale, those guys we were missing last week. And it's not a position that we can afford a lot of injuries. You know, it's one of those things where you've got to have depth. And we actually was watching the NFL game last night with the Bills and the Packers, and you could just tell the difference between both of those teams in the depth that the Bills had and the lack of depth that the Green Bay Packers had, and the difference that it makes in a ball game when you can run fresh legs out there and say, give me all you got for 2 or 3 plays and we'll give you a rest. Give me all you got and we're going to rotate you in. It makes a huge difference because those guys, while they might not be running very far, what they exert in terms of energy on those play, every single play going against these big offensive lines and trying to get out there and get after a quarterback or play the run or whatever, you don't want to have a guy gassed at the end. We saw Alabama's defense at the end of the Texas game, I remember, and it was a hot game. So, but watching that game, you just watch them. They're hands on the hips. They've been out there for a ton of plays, and the way the offense in college football is today, a lot of teams that we face are running just as many plays as they possibly can. They're trying to get to that 80-play mark to where you're just wearing out defenses and trying to find a way to just catch them off guard where they're just tired, they're exhausted, and having depth is a good offset for that. So hopefully, and I think Coach Saban talked about it today in his press conference, that there's a good chance that both those guys will start practicing today and be back for this game this weekend, because another thing that we're seeing a lot more of than we used to is it used to be 1 or 2 games a year we would be facing a mobile quarterback, a dual threat quarterback that can make plays with his feet. Now it seems like every single week every quarterback that we face, there's really no longer just a pocket passer, a guy that just stands back there and throws it away if he doesn't have anything. Most of them will go through their reads, 1, 2, 3, don't see anything, take off running. And so it used to be like a Tim Tebow, we had a game plan for once a year, and now it seems like it's every single week. And if for a defensive line, that's why you've also seen the shape of what defensive linemen and linebackers look like is very different than it was 10 years ago. You got to have not as big of guys, and you want to have guys that can run sideline to sideline that have a lot of speed, and we've got those guys if we can get them healthy. It's a tough test because you're trying to rush the passer and trying not to run by that guy to where you're opening lanes up where he can just take off and run. And the NFL is the same way. You see Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and all these guys that are very mobile. College has become the same thing, or it probably was before the NFL, but we're seeing it across the board now. Every single quarterback that we face, or you watch college football on Saturday, any game you turn on, every single quarterback has the ability to take off and run and is very athletic. So we gotta have some guys back, because you don't want to have some of these guys that are having to play all 80 snaps with no backups, or some of these young guys are going to have to step up. But the defense has been playing extremely well. They've really held us in a lot of these games, a lot of close games, getting some final stops against Texas A&M, making some big plays to where we can get off the field. And I think that's the other thing that can help this defense out. We've seen more of this, our offense have more 3-and-outs. It seems like we've had some quick possessions. And as a defensive guy, you hate that. You get over to the sideline, you probably had to play on punt team, and you have to run down on special teams, and then you got to turn around and play defense, and you finally get off, you go get a rest, and then all of a sudden you're right back on the field. It's just exhausting. It's really hard to correct any mistakes that you made from the previous drive, and you're still winded. You hadn't any chance to catch your breath. You go 3-and-out, how fast some of these offenses play. But the defense has stood up to the test. We've had a lot of really good performances by Henry To'oTo'o and Will Anderson and all those guys, Dallas Turner, Chris Braswell. Those guys have really made a name for themselves as the cheetah package, and we're seeing a lot more of that package being played against a lot of these teams, because we're facing this 4 and 5 wide receiver sets that require us to put the fast guys on the field. So there's still some room for improvement I think Eli Ricks brought a huge boost to what we saw in that Mississippi State game. He played extremely well. They really tried to attack him because they try to stay away from Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid's had a great year, not only on defensive side of the ball, but on special teams, but they're not going after him. It's either Terrion Arnold or Eli Ricks, and we saw them try to go after Eli Ricks this past weekend, and I imagine there might be a little bit of a personal vendetta this weekend trying to expose Eli Ricks. But hopefully he grows from the experience that he just had in that Mississippi State game, and he played extremely well. And he's showing us the athlete that he is. And I think it just took some time for him to get comfortable with the system, because we're not a team that's just going to throw somebody out there and just let them be an athlete. Coach Saban is going to ask him to play the correct technique, understand the concepts of the defense to where we don't get exposed, and he has finally figured out what that looks like, it seems like, just by him starting the game against Mississippi State. He understands what his role is and how to play this style of defense that might have been a little bit different from his past ones at LSU.
He's had to make the adjustment to the Alabama style of defense. Of course, you had to make the adjustment when
Yep.
Coach Saban and his staff came in. What's the toughest part of picking up this new defensive style, especially what Coach Saban demands from his defensive backs?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. In 2005, we played Florida. They were number 3 or 4 or 5 in the country, something like that. Chris Leak was quarterback. They had a phenomenal team. They come to Tuscaloosa, and we had an absolutely phenomenal defense. You know, Roman Harper, Freddie Roach, D'Amico Ryans, Mark Anderson, all these guys that end up playing in the league for a long time. We ran, Coach Kynes was the defensive coordinator at that time. We ran one defense the entire game. I mean, you didn't have to look over to the sideline to get the call, because we stayed in the exact same defense the entire time, and let's just go out there and be athletes, and you know what your responsibility is, and let's go win this ball game. This is not the same style that Coach Saban likes to implement.
So Coach got more man-on-man, just like you kind of knew your job every play?
It's just the way offenses are now is we're trying to play these games because there's so many games in pre-snap checks, pre-snap motions. They're trying to figure out what we're in, whether we're doing a man-to-man look or if we're trying to drop out in a zone. Quarterbacks are giving dummy calls, trying to see where the safeties are rolling, if they're coming in the box, or we got a too-high shell look, or we're playing some sort of man-to-man trail coverage, or whatever it is. Any little indicator that they can get to figure out, okay, I know what they're in, and this is where I'm going to go if they're in this type of coverage. And so as a defense, we're doing the same thing. We're sitting there trying to disguise our coverage, disguise our blitzes, trying to make it as difficult, but you've got to wait until the very last second to move. That's really hard as a defense to hold your water and not try to tip off the offense of what you're doing. If you're the blitzer, you're trying to make it look like you're dropping back in coverage. You know, and it's really hard when they're clapping their hands and raising their knees and motioning, and it looks like the play clock's running down. You're watching the play clock. And every single offense that you watch these days, it just seems like in college football, it used to be just the NFL that did this, but now you see college football, they're doing the same thing. They're taking every single second that they can from the play clock to get down to 0 and trying to take an advantage of figuring out what we're in. So just in terms of what Eli Ricks has to manage is it's not just go out there, you're man-to-man on this guy, go lock him down. Now, sometimes there are those calls that we do that on, but there's also sometimes where you've got a man, but if we get this certain look, we're going to switch. We're going to make all these different adjustments because if they see a straight man-to-man, they're going to be running rub routes, pick plays, doing a lot of things to try to just get us off where they can get some guys that are wide open. And we have a way to manage that, is running different coverages to where they can't take advantage of it. So he's got to understand what that is instead of just going out there and playing football like he has since he was in Pee Wee. There's a lot more complication to it, and it took us, and when Coach Saban showed up, a very long time to understand these concepts of this defense. So it's no surprise that it's taken him some time to progress, and we had a spring and a summer and everything to implement this, and it was kind of dumbed down, and now he's jumping into a defense that we're running everything that we can possibly call. So it's a big learning curve, and now he's finally got the confidence of his coaches that they can throw him out there, and he's going to go out there and do his job.
Look forward to seeing him in crimson coming up this Saturday in Tiger Stadium as Alabama takes on LSU. Tonight we're at Baumhower's Victory Grill, and you can celebrate 40 years of Baumhower's Victory Grill this fall with new flavors including Alabama hot chicken, fajita wraps, and legendary buffalo wings. Baumhower's Victory Grill, legendary fun, legendary food. When we come back, we'll actually be hearing from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, as he had his press conference earlier today in Tuscaloosa. This is the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield. Tuscaloosa was head coach Nick Saban meeting with the media on his birthday, and the team would celebrate with him later on. We'll talk about that in a moment, but it was Coach Saban getting the focus back on what's ahead this week as Alabama gets ready for LSU. Here's Coach Saban from earlier today in Tuscaloosa.
So we had a good work week last week. Really tried to emphasize with the players, what are you going to attach yourself to for the upcoming challenges for the rest of the season. Great time to do a little, self-assessment of what we need to do to get a little more consistent execution, whether it's individual players, systematically on offense, defense, special teams. So we really need to come together as a team versus good opponent, and that's obviously going to be really important for this game versus LSU, who right now is probably playing as well as anybody in the country. You know, they're very well coached. This game has always got, you know, significant implications. They're always ranked. We're always ranked. So it's a kind of a rivalry game that is always a really important matchup. You know, Brian Kelly has done an outstanding job there, bringing this team along, improving each week. You know, Jaden Daniels is one of the most productive quarterbacks in the country with his ability to run the ball, rush the ball, a very effective, efficient passer. They've got really good running backs. Got a whole core of receivers who have 20 or more catches that all do a good job in terms of getting open, catching the ball, run after catch, very good systematic scheme on offense.
Coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, as he met with the media earlier today to kickstart LSU Week 2022. Special thanks to Onward Reserve, the official apparel provider of the Crimson Tide Sports Network. For all the great gear this season, visit onwardreserve.com for all of your game day apparel. Live authentically with Onward Reserve. You're listening to the Crimson Tide Rewind Show presented by Bud Light, and this is Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield.
Now with pressure coming from the edge, bringing down the quarterback. Will Rogers is sacked by Will Anderson, the second of the game for the Crimson Tide, and State will use the timeout right here.
Time for tonight's Prescription for Success, presented by Payless Drugs, your locally owned family pharmacy with 4 locations in Birmingham. Payless can handle your prescriptions, over-the-counter solutions, and home delivery. Payless at mynewpharmacy.com against LSU. Corey Reamer, what's that prescription for success?
Well, I think the one thing is we got to make sure we can handle the road game atmosphere, because it's been something that's been a little bit of an Achilles heel for this team over the last couple of years and this season for sure. It's going in there. It's a rowdy environment. We know what this game, the implications of this game are, and we know that this game has some special. You know, everybody's excited about it. It's a homecoming of sorts for Coach Saban. There's a lot of people that are tied into these programs. We recruit very heavily down in that area, go after a lot of the same guys, pulling people out of Baton Rouge. And so I think that's going to be the main thing, is not trying to go out there and do too much. Go out there and execute our plan, block out all the noise, and not try to, for Eli Ricks especially, you know, a guy that's from that area or transferred from LSU, go out there and just play our game and limit penalties. If we could do that on the road this week, that would be a huge step forward for this team.
Certainly love to see it. We'll talk more about Alabama and LSU when we return for our final segment coming up next. This is the Crimson Tide Sports Network from Learfield. What's on tap next for Bama is brought to you by Bud Light. Bud Light proudly welcomes back Tide fans to Bryant-Denny Stadium. This year, Bud Light is for the fans. That is especially true coming up for the Iron Bowl. If you're looking to tailgate for the Iron Bowl, we invite you to Druid City Social on Saturday, November 26th for Bud Light's Iron Bowl tailgate featuring live music and ice-cold Bud Light leading up to kickoff of the Iron Bowl. But we're facing a different set of Tigers coming up this week. It is Alabama against LSU. And again, we know LSU's talented. We know Brian Kelly has always been a great coach, has had some good Notre Dame teams, but through the transfer portal, he has transformed this team even in year one.
Yeah, he has. And you start with the quarterback situation. He's got Jaden Daniels out there playing quarterback, and he's playing extremely well. I mean, he's a guy that's come in and learned this offense very fast. We saw the talent that he had when he was at Arizona State. Brian Kelly comes to LSU, goes out there and gets the quarterback. They had a few guys. Max Johnson leaves LSU, goes to Texas A&M. A lot of moving parts for this LSU roster, but they've really benefited probably the most out of anybody from this situation where Jaden Daniels shows up and he's proved to be the athlete that he has. Early on, he had some mistakes, not very crisp, but over the last few weeks, as we've watched him learn this system and get comfortable in this system, and the play calling has really tried to go towards all the strengths that he has. He's an electric player that can make big plays at any time with his arm and with his feet. And then you also got a guy like Kayshon Boutte at wide receiver who's a big playmaker. And LSU's known for having big-time wide receivers and always has been known for really good offensive skill players, defensive skill players, and that's not going to be any different. Even though they had the year they had last year, Brian Kelly's done a really fabulous job of turning this roster around really quick. And when you go to their place, it's always tough no matter what their record is because it's going to be rowdy. You got different age groups that are going to be telling you exactly where to go. It doesn't
More than
matter.
anywhere else.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I mean, it's just we had a lot of very competitive games down there, and you just know that you're in for a dogfight. It doesn't matter what the records are. The way this rivalry has shaped up for the last couple of years between these two programs, they have been the 1-2 punch out of the SEC West, always vying for that seat in Atlanta and to represent the conference in the playoff or national championship game. And all the history that's there between the two programs, it's going to be an exciting game, and hopefully we can clean up some of the stuff that we've been making some mistakes on, and get ready for a pretty solid game.
Talk to you pre- and post-game. Roll Tide.
Hey, roll Tide, Roger.
That's Corey Reamer. I'm Roger Hoover. Thank you so much for listening to Crimson Tide Rewind, presented by Bud Light, live from Baumhower's Victory Grill in Vestavia Hills. Thanks to our on-site engineer, Todd Robbins, video producer, Ethan Carabin, as well as our producer back at our Learfield studios, Jacob Smith, for putting this all together. If you missed any portion of the show, it's available on the Alabama Insider Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Good night. Roll Tide.